Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started in just a moment. We just opened the room up and folks are entering. So give us a couple more seconds and then we'll start the webinar. Great. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. On behalf of the LEAD Center, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're so glad you've joined us today to learn more about advancing financial mobility within Native communities. Today's virtual dialogue, the third in the White House initiative on achieving educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity for Native Americans and strengthening tribal colleges and universities series. Today, we'll review economic disparities and access to financial resources within Native communities. During today's virtual dialogue, presenters will share strategies to supporting Native individuals, including those with disabilities, with resources for economic self-sufficiency, the importance of banking, and financial education. You will also hear important stories from Native speakers on their financial journey to economic advancement and self-sufficiency. The third virtual dialogue is hosted by the Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities, or also known as the LEAD Center. We are a Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act Policy Development Center. The LEAD Center is led by the National Disability Institute and is funded by the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the United States Department of Labor. Together, we facilitate the adoption and integration of inclusive WIOA programs, policies, and practices through research, technical assistance, and demonstration projects. My name is Michael Rush, and I am the director of the Center for Disability Inclusive Community Development at the National Disability Institute and serve as a subject matter expert on advancing economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities at the LEAD Center. And I will be serving as the facilitator for today's virtual dialogue. Before we get started, and to ensure everyone can participate fully in today's webinar, we would like to take a moment to share with you some captioning and some important housekeeping tips. Today's webinar is live captioned, and the captions appear below the slide deck. You also have the option to open the captioning webpage in a new browser, and the links have been posted in the chat or will be momentarily. And the specific links that they will put in will be to www.streamtext.net/player?event=NDI. Once the captioning window opens on your own system, you can adjust the background color, the text color, and the fonts using the drop-down menu at the top of the screen, of the window. We also suggest that you position the window to sit right on top of the embedded captioning to allow you to see the full screen itself. Important piece. Great. One of the important pieces about this webinar is this virtual dialogue is questions. So we really encourage you to ask any questions that you might have about the content that we cover today. At any point today, you can click on the Q&A button that's at the bottom of the screen, and we'll bring up a Q&A panel or box for you. And there you can type in your questions, and then the questions will be shared with presenters. We'll make sure to save time at the end for question and answer period. We have a lot of great content today, and so we'll make sure to keep some time for Q&A as well. We encourage you to use the chat box if you're experiencing any technical issues or have any questions throughout this webinar regarding where you might need technical support. And you can please type those comments into the chat box, and then they will be addressed there as well. As we get going, to kick off our presentation today, we're very honored to have representatives from the White House Initiative on Advancing Education Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Native Americans, as well as representatives from the Office of Disability Employment Policy to provide opening remarks. To start us, we will start with Dr. Jason Cummings, who is the Deputy Director for the White House Initiative on Advancing Education, Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Native Americans and strengthening tribal colleges and universities. Dr. Cummings is an enrolled member of the Apsa-Uga Nation, Indigenous scholar, and specializes in the intersection between educational leadership and Native American education. He has innovatively worked to lead schools towards authentically serving Native American students and their communities, as well as preparing future education leaders, viewing education as a means of perpetrating the story, identifying a language of Indigenous communities, and empowering them toward a better future. Jason is a recognized leader in shifting how schools think about Indigenous culture and language. He has served in numerous leadership capacities, all with the integrated purposes of advancing educational equity among Native Americans and supporting Native American communities. Currently, Dr. Cummings is serving as the Deputy Director of the White House Initiative and strengthening economic opportunity for Native Americans and strengthening tribal colleges and universities. So with that, thank you, Jason, for joining us, and I'd like to turn it over to you to say a few words.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for joining us today and spending time with us. And I want to thank everyone on the interagency team who spent an enormous amount of time, energy, and care in designing the agenda and making this event possible. The event we're having right now is part 3 of a 4-part webinar series created through the White House Initiative, with whom I serve, as well as the Department of Labor and the Department of Education. In this webinar, we'll explore some of the economic disparities and access to financial resources in our Native American communities. As we are aware, American Indian and Alaska Native communities in the United States continue to encounter challenges with structural barriers to economic advancement. From our initiative, it's a priority to understand these systematic barriers faced by our communities and to promote Native American opportunities with other agencies through strategic partnerships to support career and technical education, job training, and career building programs, such as this webinar you're with us today in. I want to thank our panelists for joining us and being willing to share their expertise as well as their stories. Our speakers will share strategies for supporting Native individuals with resources for economic self-sufficiency, such as the importance of banking and being financially literate. As we in the Native American community know, and everybody knows, that stories are powerful tools for teaching. Stories carry encouragement, and stories can light the way before us. We've used stories for millennia to help each other, to share wisdom, encouragement, and empowerment. So once again, I want to say thank you to our panelists today for being willing to share with us, and thank you all for joining us. And I'll pass it back to our host. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Cummings. We appreciate you being with us today and sharing remarks. Next, we will hear opening remarks from Anupa Givargis, who is the Chief of Staff of the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the United States Department of Labor. Anupa is the Chief of Staff of the Office of Disability Employment Policy, where she collaborates closely with ODEP's Assistant Secretary and other U.S. Department of Labor leaders to identify and implement strategies for increasing the number and quality of employment opportunities for people with disabilities. In doing so, the Chief of Staff draws on years of legal experience in both public and nonprofit sectors. She came from the U.S. Department of Defense, where she served as a subject matter expert and senior disability policy advisor for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives. Prior to that, she worked for 7 years at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, where she was instrumental in implementing updates strengthening Section 501 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and played a leading role in the agency's Curb Cuts to the Middle Class initiative, an innovative federal cross-agency effort to increase employment and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. Please join me in welcoming Chief of Staff Anupa Givargis. Anupa,
Thank you.
I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on your location. Unfortunately, Assistant Secretary Williams could not join us today. My name is Anupa Iyer Givargis, and I am the Chief of Staff for the Office of Disability Employment Policy, or ODEP. I am a brown woman with long black hair wearing a blue dress. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this virtual dialogue. For background, ODEP is a sub-cabinet agency within the Department of Labor. We report directly to the Secretary. Congress established ODEP in 2001 as a federal agency dedicated to working across policies, programs, and agencies to promote disability employment. Our mission is to develop and influence policies and practices that increase the number and quality of employment opportunities for people with disabilities. Now, our work at ODEP to advance equity and opportunity aligns directly with the Biden-Harris administration's historic executive orders on advancing educational equity, excellence, and economic opportunity for Native Americans and strengthening tribal colleges and universities, and the executive order on further advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. We are committed to ensuring our policies and programs meet the needs of all people, including people from underserved communities, such as people with disabilities. Now, part of this work is promoting independence and integration of people with disabilities in all aspects of life. So ODEP is working to advance financial empowerment of people with disabilities, including individuals from the American Indian and Alaska Native communities. The fact is, for far too long, our country has hindered the advancement of American Indians and Alaska Natives. Centuries of governmental policies of oppression, displacement, and forced cultural assimilation has resulted in a loss of wealth, assets, and financial mobility from American Indians and Alaska Natives. And this is shown in data. According to the 2021 census data, American Indians and Alaska Natives make up 2.9% of the US population. Yet their poverty rate is 24.1%, the highest for any racial or ethnic group, and almost twice as high as the national average. That's why this administration and we at the Department of Labor are committed to improving economic opportunity, growth, and success for American Indians and Alaska Natives. Today's virtual gathering, we hope you will gain a deeper understanding of strategies that promote economic empowerment and financial education for American Indians and Alaska Native individuals, including those with disabilities. You will have the opportunity to hear from a panel consisting of individuals with disabilities from this community on their own experiences and perspectives on financial well-being. I'd like to conclude my remarks by thanking our speakers and panelists for sharing your expertise and personal journey. Michael, I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Anupa. Thank you so much for sharing remarks. We really appreciate it. So now we're going to get into our program, and really excited about today's conversation, and want to just share with you the objectives for today. So through our time together, we're going to gain a deeper understanding of the impact of financial inequalities within urban and rural tribal communities. We're going to understand the impact of asset building tools offered by Native-led nonprofits and Native nations. We're also going to learn about personal journeys of success from multiple perspectives within Native communities. And then we're also going to identify promising Native asset building practices of areas of need, resources, and policy considerations to inform a national policy agenda. So with that, we are fortunate, next slide please, for today's moderator to be with us. We have Dr. Spiro Manson, Little Shell, Chippewa, is a distinguished professor of public health and psychiatry, and directs the Centers for American Indian and Alaska Native Health, and occupies the Colorado Trust Chair in American Indian Health within the Colorado School of Public Health at the University of Colorado's Anschutz Medical Campus. A medical anthropologist, his programs include 10 national centers which pursue research, program development, training, and collaboration with 250 Native communities spanning rural, reservation, urban, and village settings across the country. Please join me in welcoming Spiro to today's virtual session, and thank you, Spiro, for serving as today's moderator. We're very grateful, and we'll turn it over to you.
Miigwech, Michael, and Ani Buju to many of my brothers and sisters from across the country in joining us today. As Michael indicated, my role is to orchestrate our conversation today, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to do so. We will begin, as noted, with first of our two storytellers sharing their lived experiences. We'll then shift to the three exemplar programs that have emerged across the country at the cutting edge of addressing these various issues. And then we'll move into questions and answers, first of those respective cutting edge programs and of the storytellers as your interests suggest. So let's move to why we're here today. I am privileged to introduce to you the first of our storytellers. Her name is Rosalie Perry. She's Ak-Chin Papago, or Tohono O'odham, and an enrolled member of the Ak-Chin Indian community in Arizona. She has been employed with Ability 360 for 20 years and is the current employment coordinator for Ability 360 Employment Services. Rosalie presently serves on the American Indian Disability Summit Planning Committee, an annual event which began as a talking circle in 2004 and is now one of the major forums for these kinds of discussions. The summit has a 19-year history as a collaborative community event that provides meaningful and culturally relevant resources and information for families and youth with disabilities in and around Indian country. Rosalie will be followed immediately by Dr. Crystal Hernandez, who is a proud member of the Cherokee Nation and Latina. She serves as the state of Oklahoma as the executive director of the Tulsa Center for Behavioral Health, which is an adult civil psychiatric hospital, and the Oklahoma Forensic Center, which is the sole forensic psychiatric hospital for adjudicative competency and insanity, and the Transitions Recovery Center, which is a forensic mental health step-down unit. Crystal is considered a tribal disabilities expert as well as a researcher, autism mother, and ally. Crystal is the creator and co-host of the Black Feathers podcast, Tribal Disabilities Conversations for All, rooted in culture, storytelling, and data. So let's turn to Rosalie Perry, if you will.
Skugtash, Ani Abjurgik, Rosalie Perry. Good day, everyone. My name is Rosalie Perry, and I am a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and an elder in my community, and a person with a disability. The Auction Indian community is one of 22 federally recognized tribes in Arizona. And as a young girl growing up on the reservation, I didn't think about financial wellness. My hope and dream was one day to become a social worker. When I became a mother, that hope and dream was set aside. Once my children grew older, the desire to go to college was still there. But where would I start? Where would I get the funding? How would I go to school and still support my family? Well, with the help of my tribal community, I applied for funding from the education department, as well as applying for Pell Grants and other grants. After completing 1 year of community college, I was involved in a rollover accident, sustaining an injury, which was an incomplete spinal cord injury. Going through 3 months in the hospital and rehabilitation, there were so many emotions I felt, so many tears, hurt, anger, and isolation. But with the help and support of family and friends, I reached out to resources that assisted people with disabilities, such as the independent living rehabilitation services to help modify my home, making it accessible from my wheelchair. The transit service Dial-A-Ride, transporting me back and forth to school, and the disability resource centers help provide accommodations to continue my schooling, all services provided with little or no cost. However, this could not have been achieved if I were to stay on my tribal lands. In order for that to happen, I had to move to the city to receive these resources. I was able to return to school, and in my last year, I interned at Arizona Bridge to Independent Living, now Ability 360. I graduated from Arizona State University, and within the year of my graduation, I became employed with Ability 360. I was asked, what is the meaning of financial wellness? To me, it's meeting the basic needs, managing money for the short and long term, saving and planning and preparing for emergencies, and staying on top of expenses and reaching my financial goals. What actions have I taken to build financial wellness? Budgeting my money, keeping financial records in order and having a sound mind, setting limits on my spending, making sure my needs are taken care of and all of my wants before all of my wants, and continue to be gainfully employed until retirement. And in closing, I feel a sense of responsibility to share my journey and message to others who come from Native communities. My message is that although there may be obstacles to overcome, one must continue to move forward as best as one can and never be afraid to ask for assistance. There is no shame in that. I thank you, Sparrow, for the kind introduction and the Lead Center for giving me this opportunity to share. Thank you.
Rosalie, we thank you for sharing the inspiring journey that you charted for us and underscoring the fact that although faced with challenges and presented with opportunities, that the resilience of Native people and you particularly and your loved ones shines through all of that. So thank you.
Thank
So
you.
let's turn to Dr. Crystal Hernandez. Crystal, if you would please. Thank you.
Thank you. Osayo. My story is not unlike many others. Young parents, limited means, in a rural community trying to thrive, and in most instances, just survive. My parents received their GEDs after having to forego education to support their families. Their lives were and continue to be very difficult. I am a story collector because in our stories is great power, wisdom, and truth. They ignite the fire that shifts policy and makes looking away harder. I have made it my mission to help others share their voice and stories to push for positive change focused on quality, inclusion, dignity, and equity. I do not come from money, therefore money must come from me. What this means is my family does not have the financial means from generational wealth or connections. What this means is I work 10 times harder to forge a path in a world that has not always made it easy for people like me to enter into the room and fill the seats that others seem to find so easily. What this means is I want my children to have the resources to thrive, not just survive. There continues to be a need for more funding, data, supports, and services truly built by and for Native Americans. We must make it possible to access resources rather than continually building systems that make resources out of reach. When we talk about tribal nations, we must also recognize and honor sovereignty, giving them the same abilities to manage their funding, their programs, their projects, and services, just like states do. We have segmented and one-off projects, catchy marketing campaigns, consultant theater, service deserts, and lack of representation in higher level systems, and an absolute disconnect with culture. We need more and deserve more. We need to be in the spaces where decisions are made, lending our knowledge and experiences to the items of consideration for funding, policy, and creation, especially when the topic of consideration is us. We must continue to challenge stagnant and oppressive and disrespectful ways of business and communication. We must have the ability to create systems of wealth and resource within our families, which can benefit our generations to come. We are resilient people. We persist despite continual challenges. But when do the challenges stop? When does it get easier? We are not a people that need to be rescued, but instead we are a people that want to be part of building meaningful systems of service with the foundations and hopes of our ancestors. With respect to time, I wanted to share a few items with you. Roughly 8 months ago, in partnership with the State of the States on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities and the Administration for Community Living, we launched Black Feathers Podcast, which focuses on Native American experiences and journeys with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We've had amazing guests join us so far and share their stories with more to come. We get to hear their struggles, their triumphs, their beliefs and customs, and their calls to action. It is their words that hold such critical perspective and power. On a recent episode, we were able to hear how the lack of accommodations and resource impacts one's ability to thrive and be self-sufficient, as well as the ability to connect with their tribe, customs, and partake in activities that are significantly meaningful. We cannot continue to create and reinforce barriers for those in our Native communities, especially those in our Native disability communities. We must evolve, learn, fund, and shift the business as usual philosophy. The intersectionality of disability and our Native people share not just a historical context, not just a historical trauma. They're riddled with obstacles and violations of rights, and it is a continual trauma that is reinforced over and over again. Representation matters, our voices and experiences matter, and most significantly, we matter. When we create systems built on the foundations of equity, accessibility, dignity, and purpose, we create a legacy of humanity that spans beyond us and our time physically here on this earth. That is why we must empower the next generation to take on this role of advocating, building, and innovating. To end, I would like to read one of my recent posts from a podcast episode about youth. Dear Native youth, it is you that will heal our tired hearts, you that will take our stories, customs, and beliefs and bring them forward. It is you that will weave a future from our past, our tears, our songs, and our dreams. You will take paths newly created by walking with the strength and dignity of our ancestors and elders beside you. You will forge forward into spaces and places once blocked and forbidden. You will take the hopes of our generations before us and ignite a fire within you so bright that it will shine the way for the next generations of our people. You, our Native youth, are unstoppable. Thank you. Wadu.
Oh, Crystal, such a valuable contribution already to this conversation, and the way in which you've built upon Rosalie's sharing and story from your personal experience as an individual and as a parent, and how these challenges surfaced in your own life, and then sharing with us how you built upon these experiences and moving forward and drawing our attention to the broader structural constraints and resources that are required to enable us to move forward in this manner of resilience and persistence. And then ultimately, what a wonderful conclusion to your remarks with respect to this comments, with respect to our youth and disseminating this message across Indian country today. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now turn to representatives of 3 cutting-edge program efforts across the country. And I ask the audience to keep in mind the stories that both Rosalie and Crystal have shared, because they have roots in each of the programs and are relevant to each. We will begin first with Dr. Christy Finsel, who is the Executive Director for the Oklahoma Native Assets Coalition, Incorporated. Christy is a tribal citizen of the Osage Nation. Since 2011, she has directed ONAC, a Native-led nonprofit started in 2001. ONAC is an intermediary grant funder, as well as provides financial services to Native communities. ONAC also coordinates both the National Native Bank on ONAC initiative and the Native Earned Income Tax Credit Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Network. A mouthful, Christy. Hopefully I got that correct.
You did.
Which provides training and technical assistance and conducts national Native asset building research. Christy has been conducting Native asset building research and administering various asset building programs since 2003. Christy will be joined by Ms. Stephanie Coate. Stephanie is Senior Programs Officer and Financial and Education and Assistant for Building at OISTA Corporation. She has been with the corporation since January of 2012. In her career history, Stephanie worked with First Nations Development Institute, the Cielo Foundation, Native Community Development Financial Institutions Network, the Potlatch Fund, Longhouse Media, and the Northwest Native Development Fund. She is a master trainer for the Building Native Community Suite of Curriculum, a certified HUD, Housing Counselor, credit as an Asset Master Trainer, credit SMART Curriculum Instructor, NeighborWorks America Center for Home Ownership Education and Counseling, certified in Home Ownership Counseling, and a certified professional coach through the Coaching for Transformation program with the Leadership That Works. And our third presenter is Mr. Lee Gashioma, Dr. Gashioma. He is currently working with the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Training and Technical Assistance Center as the program manager and lead for the Traditional and Cultural Guidance and Support Hub. The center is located on the Northern Arizona University campus at the Institute for Human Development. Lee is a member of the Hopi tribe. He started working with the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Services projects as the graduate research assistant with the American Indian Rehabilitation Research and Training Center in 1992. Until 2005, Lee worked closely with these projects as the director of the Capacity Building for American Indians program, funded by the Rehabilitation Services Administration to secure funds to provide vocational rehabilitation services for tribal members with disabilities to prepare for and achieve gainful competitive employment. We'll now move to the next slide, please. And we'll begin with Christy, if you will.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to participate today. This is my contact information if needed later. Next slide, please. A little bit about the Oklahoma Native Assets Coalition. As mentioned, we are a Native-led nonprofit, and we have a 22-year history of providing asset building services in Native communities. To be extra confusing, we have kept our name, but we do serve in a national capacity and have done so since 2018. Next slide, please. So, we were asked to talk just briefly about why this work is needed. And so part of that conversation is to acknowledge this history of asset stripping that has occurred in Native communities and still occurs today. We have the highest rates of poverty in the country. From 2017, we also have the highest rates of unbanked and underbanked rates in the country at 50.5%. And this digital equity piece is really important because it relates to accessing services. And so because of geographic access to financial institutions, historic mistrust of those institutions, and difficulty with affording home internet subscriptions and devices and having access to broadband, there's a lot of need there to try to connect these services. Next slide, please. So we also know from research that we have some of the lowest rates of saving for college for children, for retirement and emergency. Obviously, that is related to some of the poverty rates. And that nearly 80% of Native Americans over the age of 25 hold less than a bachelor's degree. We also have disparity when it comes to home ownership and to unemployment. Next slide, please. So I think this is really one of our important messages is that when we're thinking about the Native asset building field, though we have all of these challenges that we're working with, we also have a tremendous amount of capacity. And so when we think about the Native asset building field, it is comprised of Native nations, Native-led nonprofits that are not community development financial institutions, so they're not lending, with treasury funds. And then we also have CDFIs that deliver asset building programs to Native families. So what's crucial is that all of these work together. And so there's needed funding and needed options for everyone to be at the table because they're all offering asset building services. Many have infrastructure and are ready to scale. They have strong track records. And so there is need for more equitable distribution of resources at the federal level, at the state level, and from the philanthropic community to fund everyone in that ecosystem because we all play important roles. We know that there has been a lot of challenge with raising funding. So when we think about the funding from larger US foundations, we struggle, and this has impacted the ability to scale. But we do have staff that have years of experience across the country, and they're ready to go. So next slide, please. So I thought I'd mention just briefly a little bit about ONAC's program. So as mentioned, we are an intermediary grant funder. And in the past several years, we've particularly been funding Native volunteer income tax assistance sites. These are really an important piece of the Native asset building equation because they help turn tax time into asset building time. And so we have been supporting those sites because we think in-person tax preparation is really important. And we also coordinate the National Native EITC and VITA network. Again, that mouthful. And we're promoting national banking access through coordination of a Native Bank On coalition, trying to help tribal citizens connect to safe and affordable bank accounts. We also provide the training and technical assistance to help others in the field. And we're working on preventions of frauds and scams. Next slide, please. We also provide Native-specific financial education. And for any American Indian or Alaska Native, regardless of where they reside in the United States, we provide free financial coaching by phone or teleconference. We're also, ONAC is directly administering programs, so we seed fund children's savings accounts, seed fund emergency savings accounts, provide emergency cash assistance, provide incentives for bank on accounts, and provide emergency savings accounts. Additionally, the research is important and resource guides. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to turn it over to Stephanie, and we appreciate the opportunity to participate today.
Ani, Stephanie Cody and Dijnikas, Grand Traverse Band, Odawa, Minwa, Chippewa, and Madagos. Hello, my name is Stephanie Cote. I am Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, and I am Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe, which in short, I refer to myself as Anishinaabe, which means of the three fires. I just want to say Chimigwech, big thank you to for the invitation to share OWISTA's offerings in the financial education space. Next slide. The OWISTA Corporation, we are a national native CDFI intermediary, and that's Community Development Financial Institution. And you can read our mission. In short, it's to build financial assets within the economic deserts of reservations and urban native communities. We, and then our values are, we believe that when armed with appropriate resources, our Native people hold the capacity and ingenuity to ensure sustainable economic, spiritual, and cultural well-being of our communities. OWISTA was established in 1999 through our parent company, our former parent company, First Nations Development Institute, out of a need to build the economies within rural Native nations. A Native CDFI, and as an intermediary, we provide services to other Native CDFIs. As you can see on the screen, we have three arms within OWISTA. We have training and technical assistance. This is my department where we provide financial education for practitioners across the nation. The lending and capitalization, as an intermediary, we take investment capital and distribute it out to Native CDFIs. And we're also able to tribal nations. And then the research and policy, just as Christy had mentioned with ONAC, it's very important to provide the research to support our efforts, as well as advocate for those policy changes to support Native economic development. Within my Department of Training and Technical Assistance, we do serve Native CDFIs. A community development financial institution is required alongside their loan capital to provide training to their loan clients. So this is where the training and technical assistance comes in. It's my pleasure, though, I serve about 15% Native CDFI staff. I also serve tribal departments within our training and technical assistance. So within each individual tribe, there are tribal departments that are taking the initiative to train and teach their tribal communities Native financial education. On the screen, you can see the suite of curricula that we offer. So we have financial skills for families. This is an adult group financial education. This also was born out of the advent of OWISTA. So it was created in collaboration between First Nations Development Institute and OWISTA Corporation back in 2000, or yes, 2000, right after 1999. So it's a 20-plus-year-old curricula that's on its 5th edition. Next, we have our youth financial education curriculum. This came out just a few years ago in 2019. And this was brought out just because we see a lot of triage happening with our adult teaching. With our adult education, so breaking bad habits, instilling newer habits. They wanted to start out young. As we saw, there's a question in the chat about teaching our younger generations financial education before they graduate high school. This is the curriculum that we created to support that. Next, we have a lot of practitioners working one-on-one, and in other communities, our non-Native communities, we find coaching is a key to goal attainment. So having a financial coach work alongside you on your journey, we've seen higher rates of goal attainment. This came out in 2018, this curriculum, and we made a specific, Native-specific, one-on-one adult education coaching curriculum. I'm pleased to announce in 2023, we will be launching a coaching 2.0, taking this coaching curriculum, which is just a 3-day training, to the next level. So taking a deeper dive with clients. Then we have coaching for credit building, which is also coming out. It's going to be a 1-day training where it will launch in 2024, and it's specific to asset building tools through access to credit. And then finally, we noticed there was a gap in elder financial education. So we are coming out with an elder-specific financial education to broaden our suite of curricula. Additional offerings, we have the Credit as an Asset, which is Credit Builders Alliance, their curriculum, but we offer it as just an advanced credit curriculum. I am also trained in Credit as an Asset small business. This is a small business specific for credit. And then finally, Spending Frenzy. This is a youth money management fair that we provide alongside our youth curriculum. So really fun half-day event. Next slide. So that was the main piece I wanted to cover. So these next slides are going to go by really quick. As a Native CDFI, I just wanted to highlight some of our strategic goals, which would be to increase our loan portfolio by to 40 million. We are now a $50 million organization. To provide homeownership financing for Native families. We are a HUD housing intermediary. So we are supporting Native CDFIs in their HUD housing capacities. And then, of course, our financial training. Next slide, which is always going strong. Increasing Native CDFIs to build resilience. This is kind of a broad sweeping goal, but still a goal. And then creating those vibrant communities, goal number 5, just building institutional capacity. Next slide. So what does this look like? We provide several hours of technical assistance. So that's one-on-one work with organizations. We provide several trainings. So we had 3,500 plus go through our webinars and conferences and trainings in 2021, so during the global lockdown. And lots of re-granting, and then our trainings that were led by practitioners. Next slide. So as we mentioned, we are a $50 million organization. We were able to, throughout our years, funnel $50 million into Indian country. There are housing units that were created through this effort, jobs created and retained, and small businesses financed. Next slide. So there's just a map of our borrowers. I will drop a link in the chat. You can find your Native CDFIs. They're all across the country and still emerging because they're proven on asset development within communities. Next slide. Just a little bit of our loan portfolio growth. We're up to this year 48 borrowers, so a little outdated, but Zero write-offs and zero past due still continues today. Next slide. Just you'll have the slides available, but this is where we say that it's a proven model, native CDFIs. A lot are nonprofits, most of them, I want to say 98% are going to be nonprofit, and they're grassroots-led organizations created to build economic growth within tribal nations. Next slide. So we are an SBA navigator site, and we're supporting small businesses, and just wanted to highlight that helps provide economic stability within communities, is keeping assets local. Next slide. And of course, creating home ownership. Next slide. And there we are. And it's my pleasure to turn it over to the next speaker. So thank you so much for allowing me to present today. Next slide.
Good morning. Good afternoon. This is Lee Geshioma. I am with the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Training and Technical Assistance Center. It's a long program name, so we refer to it as the AVRTAC. In October of 2021, the Northern Arizona University Institute for Human Development received a 5-year cooperative grant from the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, to provide services to the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Services Projects, AVRS project, by providing training, education, and technical assistance to ensure the provision of culturally appropriate and responsive VR services for eligible tribal consumers or participants who reside on or near federal and state Indian reservations to prepare for and achieve successful employment outcome. Next slide, please. Go back one more slide, please. The NAU land acknowledgement reads, NAU sits at the base of the San Francisco Peaks. In my tribal language, we call it the Nuvatuke'ori, snow-capped mountains, on homeland sacred to Native Americans throughout the region. We honor their past, present, and future generations who have lived here for millennia and will forever call this place home. Next slide, please. The new AVRTAC, in partnership with the Northwest Indian College, who are managing the Tribal Vocational Institute located in Bellingham, Washington. In partnership, we are serving the AVRS project by providing on-site and virtual intensive technical assistance for selective AVRS project. We also provide virtual targeted technical assistance as requested by individual AVRS projects. We also provide universal technical assistance designed for self-paced training and use of our material on our project website. We conduct monthly webinars and talking circles on selected VR topics. The AVRS project personnel training are provided by the Northwest Indian Tribal College. And students are awarded the certificate of completion for 13 courses in fundamental tribal VR knowledge and skills. Next slide, please. Here you see a map of the United States. And this map depicts the 93 AVRS projects located in 26 states across the country. Several of the tribal voc rehab projects serve more than one tribe, so approximately 150 tribes are benefiting from the RSA funding. The AVERS projects receive discretionary 5-year federal funding and must compete with existing tribal VR projects and new eligible tribes to continue provision of VR services. The federal funding support is 90% with tribal match of 10%. The tribal VR project partner with state VR agencies and other agencies to provide a comprehensive array of services for each tribal consumer or participant. In 1975, the first tribe to receive federal funding to manage their own VR program was the Navajo Nation in Arizona. From one tribal VR program, we now have 93 tribal VR projects. However, there is a continuing need for federal funding and tribal support to increase services for tribal members with disabilities to prepare for and maintain, regain, and advance in gainful employment. Next slide, please. Here, there is information regarding the 575 federally recognized tribes as recognized by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to establish as sovereign tribal governments. These sovereign tribes have a government-to-government relationship with the United States, with the responsibilities, powers, limitations, and obligations attached to that designation and are eligible for funding and services from the BIA. Next slide, please. This information provides the unemployment rate, which indicates that in Indian country, unemployment rate is higher than the general population. It's a known fact that the situation on tribal reservations is even more, with unemployment rates reported to us as ranging from 20 to 80%. Next slide, please. This information that you now see also provides information regarding American Indians with disability and their unemployment or underemployment for the time period that is reported. The incidence of disabilities for American Indians and Alaska Native is significantly higher than the general population. Next slide, please. Disability incident rate for Native Americans is reported to be 17.2% as compared to 12% for the United States general population. These data indicate a substantial need to support the American Indians and Alaska Native individuals with disability in obtaining employment. Next slide, please. The RSA established the AVERS purpose statement, which reads in part that these projects are established to provide VR services, including culturally appropriate services to American Indians with disabilities who reside on or near federal or state reservations, consistent with such eligible individuals' strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice, so that such individual may prepare for and engage in high quality employment that will increase opportunities for economic self-sufficiency. Next slide, please. Here on the slide, you see the AVERTAC holistic traditional service delivery model. In our work with tribal VR projects, we have learned that most American Indians and Alaska Natives do not have one word to describe or define disability in their tribal languages. Tribal perspective view unwellness or illness to be a state of disharmony in the body, mind, soul, and spirit. If one of the four primary domains is out of harmony, the whole being is out of harmony. The tribes believe that each one of us is responsible for our own wellness. Recognizing this, the ABRTAC team deemed it especially important to develop a tribal VR process that resonates with tribal perspectives and applicable within tribal contextual settings. Here we see the ABR's holistic traditional service model that is consumer participant centered. This model not only includes the federal requirements addressing the individual physical and mental needs, but also takes into consideration the spiritual and emotional needs of the individual and the environment in which he or she lives. The native medicine wheel with the four colors of yellow, red, black, and white are considered very sacred by Native Americans, and its interpretation and meaning varies among the tribes, as well as the use for traditional healing purposes. Some tribal VR projects are using their own VR process models and use their own traditional language for their tribal VR project names. Many tribal members with disabilities have benefited from the local VR services and achieving successful employment outcomes that are acknowledged throughout the community gatherings and celebrations. It has been reported that at least 60 to 65% of the efforts of the tribal vocational rehabilitation programs result in successful employment outcome. And at this time, I would like to personally and publicly thank the tribal vocational rehabilitation programs for your effort in serving our relatives with disabilities. Go quiet, thank you.
Thank you all, Christy, Stephanie, and Lee. It's impossible to imagine a more comprehensive yet complementary set of presentations to paint the landscape of financial and asset building in American Indian Alaska Native communities, all the way from the level of individual challenges and opportunities to structural, tribal, and nationwide efforts. We'll now turn to further comments by the presenters, driven by several questions that have been suggested by the White House leadership. The first, and I'll direct this first to Christy and Stephanie, if you will, could you elaborate a bit on what you have seen and envision as future opportunities to build the financial health of Native communities, including individuals with disabilities? Christy or Stephanie, either of you wish to begin?
Okay, thank you. You know, what we have found at ONAC is that when we're offering an integrated approach to asset building, it's highly successful. So, for example, individuals might register to receive free financial coaching. And then once they've completed that, then we start incrementally offering opportunities for children's savings accounts so that they can open those, and then we seed fund them to help support their children going on for trade school or college or other, higher ed or extended ed. And then also, start helping them, get banked in a safe and affordable bank account and seed fund those accounts, make opportunities available for those that want to kind of repair or build their credit. Those that are ready to start thinking about home ownership can make plans accordingly. And then we have some down payment assistance available, trying to think about how to connect them to free tax preparation in their local communities or otherwise. And we'll be launching soon a revolving loan fund. This is connected to integrated capital. And, as we can do this, without having to be a CDFI. So this is really a crucial piece too, when we're hearing from some of the individuals in the financial coaching program, they don't have the money for a match for an SBA loan. They're interested in kind of clean energy projects. They might need some help for land back or to purchase a home. So some of those pieces there. And so that coupled with that financial education and the coaching that's Native specific and talks about assets very broadly, not just as money is crucial. And so we think that approach can work. And so I'll pass it off to Stephanie.
Well, thank you, Christy. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I love what ONAC has to offer. And definitely the free coaching, take advantage of it if you have the opportunity to. They serve Native communities across the nation. Opportunities for building the financial health of Native communities. Obviously, I'm biased to Native CDFIs because we're an intermediary, and we've seen a lot of success with this structure. But I want to also point out that you can't financial educate your way out of poverty, especially when you're in an asset depleted community. And so having access to the assets is really important. That's, again, why I'm slightly biased, because Native CDFIs provide that outlet to financial assets that aren't normally within communities. And then coupling that with financial education, we've seen a lot of success. And then, as Christy had mentioned, pairing that also, the other layer of the onion is coaching. So having that one-on-one person to work with that's rooted within the community is very important. Or if they're not within the community, as Christy, having it rooted within Native cultural practices. So someone who's Native and understands that perspective. We've seen a lot of success in that area, and then building that financial health. So that's what I would have to answer that. Oh, that was the point. Sorry, fleeting thought that came by was that our model is grassroots. So it starts within the community. And I wanted to preface that financial health comes from the outside. We need those assets, but it also comes from within. So within the community, you have that trust built among community members, and then providing Native specific and relevant assets and education. So that's how you build that foundation.
Thank you, Christine and Stephanie, both. And Stephanie, your last comment underscores a critical element in this formula towards financial health, and that is self-determination. And it's not just an abstract concept. It's in fact demonstrated throughout your presentations about the importance of rooting the solutions to these problems within the local communities and their perspective and aspirations and hopes. Thank you. We'll turn now to the second question, if you can shift the slide over, and I'll address this to Lee. Lee, the question is, in your experience and from your perspective, what are the systematic and programmatic barriers that need to be addressed as we struggle with ensuring financial health and well-being for Native communities?
I noted several observations that I would like to share with the audience today. The first one is improved relationship between the 574 sovereign tribal nations and the federal government, to government partnership to address the needs, secure adequate funding, and ensure equal access to resources for tribal members with disability for improved quality of life and financial self-sufficiency. I thank President Joe Biden for his presence at the November 2022 White House Tribal Nations Summit. I believe this is an example of building a strong and solid relationship with the tribes. Another observation is the need for involvement of tribal leaders, individuals with disabilities, family members, and key stakeholders in the next reauthorization of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 to include policy changes and address the specific needs of tribal members with disabilities who reside on or near federal and state tribal lands and designated service area. Another one is to ensure compliance of state VR agencies to implement the required cooperative agreements with tribal VR agencies funded by the U.S. Department of Education, OSHERS. And to also ensure tribal VR agency membership on the state rehabilitation councils and the state independent living councils to improve VR services for tribal members with disabilities to achieve gainful employment. Another important observation is to dispel the negative misconception, stereotypes, and to move toward changing the public's attitude toward the individuals with disabilities. Many people still focus on the individual's disability and not the person. One's disability does not define him or her. Native Americans reside in either isolated or urban communities, therefore available resources and opportunities for tribal economic development, access to higher education, quality medical care, housing, technology, competitive employment, and transportation differ when it comes to planning and developing effective and sustaining tribal nation building. Existing federal government mandated policies affecting sovereign tribal nations are often vague, culturally inappropriate, and programmatic in their interpretation and implementation. For example, the ADA of 1990 and tribal governments not being recognized as employers. Another example is the challenge for some tribal VR service projects to implement the special application requirements to assure that facilities use meet facility and program accessibility requirements regarding the Architectural Barriers Act of 1968, the ADA of 1990, and the Section 504 of the Act. And when we meet with individual tribal voc rehab programs and they share their stories as to their tribal government setup and the leadership that is provided or not adequately provided to the program managers, this becomes an issue to assure meeting the special application requirements. Another observation is employment opportunities for tribal members with and without disability are limited in rural and isolated communities. That requires the AVERS project's innovative and creative planning to assist tribal consumers or participants to develop viable individual plan for employment or IPEs. Typical employment outcome of an 8-to-5 job setting is not always the case. So many tribal consumers develop vocational goals to pursue self-employment and subsistence living activities to remain in their tribal communities and to honor traditional livelihoods practiced since time immemorial. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. You've set wonderfully the stage for the next question, and I will ask Stephanie to begin and Christy to respond subsequently. And that question is, given what Lee and your prior points that you've made in your respective presentations, Stephanie, what are the policy changes, the actual policy changes that you, based upon your experience in your organization's long-standing perspective involved in this area, do you recommend to build the financial health of individuals with disabilities in Native communities? And then I'll ask you, Christy, to follow up with your view on this.
Yeah, great question. And I am our organization has a slight bias where we focus on Native CDFIs. So one policy change that we've seen that we advocate strongly for is Native set-asides in granting. As Christy's slides had mentioned, that there is a huge gap within government, state, and private foundation funding to Native communities is very disproportionate when you look at it from a quantitative standpoint. So one piece that we advocate for, and it comes up quite regularly, especially within the government grants, is advocating for those set-asides for Native community or Native grants. So one that we see frequently is the NACA, the Native American set aside specifically for from the CDFI fund grants. But this is a continuous pursuit that we have along policy changes, is ensuring that our Natives have a seat at the table when it comes to grant funding.
Thank you, Stephanie. And, we appreciate the advocacy that OESTA and others are doing in this area. It's really important. And, we think that the Native CDFIs play a crucial role in this ecosystem for the Native asset building field and kind of economic development in general. So at the larger level and then at the family level. So in relation to that, we also are advocating for support for tribally administered asset building programs to receive equitable funding, as well as the all the Native nonprofits that are not eligible for CDFI funding to also be included. It's really crucial that everyone be at the table because there's geographic service limitations that play in. And so there have to be opportunities for all tribal citizens, those with disabilities, especially, to be able to have access to services. And so we think that it's important to make sure that there's equitable funding there. We also really do think it's still important to provide resources at the federal level for in-person volunteer income tax assistance. That's particularly needed with the trust issues, but also just because of the digital equity challenges and lack of broadband and then lack of access to devices. So there's trusted partners that are already in place there, and we'd like to see an increase in support for Native VITA. And then this piece that Stephanie mentioned about kind of this relationship between public and private, and thinking about how those are being offered. So I think there's efforts that are emerging from Interior and the White House. And we think it's crucial to have all of these individuals and entities in the ecosystem be able to also access equitably those MOUs because of this really long-standing challenge with the lack of funding, particularly at the federal and from the philanthropic community. How do we play catch up? And so if everyone has an opportunity to be able to sign these MOUs, to be able to access those relationships and connect with federal programs, and also to be able to connect there, we think it's crucial. So we appreciate the start to those efforts and look forward to the expansion of those, and think that from a policy implementation piece, that's really important. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for those very specific recommendations. Now this takes us into the broader question and answer period. There are a number of questions that have appeared, offered by members of the audience. And Sarah, I think I can navigate this. It's easier than I thought. So I apologize for my initial uncertainties in that regard. So Stephanie and Christy, let's turn to you first. There's a question as, how do you, if you do, work to address predatory lending and loans in Indian country?
So the way that we address them through specifically our financial education curriculum addresses the presence of the predatory lending. But I do want to note that predatory lending within economic deserts does sometimes have a place and time. So our keynote last week mentioned a story where sometimes her mom would access these a predatory lending institution because it was the only institution available. And so if it was the choice between having your gas shut off or your electricity gone and accessing a predatory lender, then they'd lean into that. Is it something that we want to advocate for? No. We advocate for having local community grassroots institutions available to access first if they're within your community, and then also having those programs that maybe the tribe offers, or maybe urban native centers where emergency funding is available. The way that we do recognize it, and then definitely advocate avoiding them at all costs within our curricula. And then on the policy side, at any time something's coming up that would promote predatory lending services, kind of lobbying, or not lobbying, we don't lobby, but advocating against those services. And then we've seen successes within states that just abolish those types of practices altogether. And so then we see around our tribal reservations, when we talk about predatory lending, they're like, oh yeah, that's not an issue because it's not in our state. So I would definitely lean into advocating that your state eliminates any type of predatory lending.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. And Christy, unless you have something very specific to add to this, another question has surfaced that I'd like to put to you, if that is okay. One of the attendees asked, why aren't there more credit unions on tribal nations? Or are there credit unions on tribal nations that I haven't heard of? Are you aware of any?
Yeah, yes, there are some, I think, and there's some emerging. And then I think also there's Native-owned banks, and we've been trying from the Bank On initiative that we're coordinating nationally to try to connect to Native-owned banks to see if they will get Bank On certified so that they can offer these safe and affordable accounts that have very low fees and transparent fees. It's just a tool in the toolbox. We understand the hesitancy towards being banked for some, but again, this addresses this concern about how do you avoid predatory practices. And so if you have a safe and affordable account, that's one way to do it. Among other tools, we work with Federal Trade Commission on prevention of frauds and scams. And they're working with a lot of other, Native entities as well. And then, how to report if it's happening. So, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox here. But yeah, the banking access piece is still a hard nut to crack, and it's a longer term commitment from Native-led entities to keep working on trying to help tribal citizens get connected.
Thank you, Christy. And Lee, the next question seems to be within your purview. The question is, how are tribal VR services different from standard VR services, if you would, please?
There are several differences between the tribal book rehab program and the state VR program. One example is the eligibility criteria. In addition to the two state VR eligibility criteria, tribal applicants must also meet the eligibility criteria that include being a member of a federally recognized or state recognized tribe. They must reside on or near the tribal reservation or the designated state reservation. Another difference is tribal vocational rehabilitation programs are permitted to provide traditional healing services that state VR agencies are not allowed to do. Another big difference is Self-employment and subsistence activities is still very strong in Indian country. So recognizing that unemployment is very high, the tribal voc rehab program staff need to be very creative in assisting the tribal consumers if they so chose to work towards a self-employment or subsistence activity to help them plan this and to provide the necessary resources to assure that successful employment outcome is achieved.
Thank you, Lee, very much. We only have 2 or 3 minutes left, and to bring us back full circle, I want to invite Crystal and/or Rosalie to close on some of the comments. Was there anything in particular that arose in this last set of presentations in the question and answer period that you, Crystal or Rosalie, resonated to and you'd like to speak to?
I would just like to, number one, thank everyone for this opportunity and for the information that they've shared. But I want to just echo that a lot of people do not know this. They don't know this information. They don't know about the things accessible to them. So we just need to make sure that we're trying all platforms to reach them and make sure that folks know that resources are available and that we continue to listen to the gaps and to the needs and to the things that are really relevant for each of the communities and each of the families and individuals.
Thank you, Crystal and Rosalie.
I thank you for giving me the opportunity. I just like to echo what Crystal said, and also to mention that in my tribal community, we do have resources now. The situation that happened to me, and I call it a situation because I move on, is that it happened 25 years ago. And so things have developed and resources have been gained here. So I really want to share that with you also. And again, just thank you for giving us this opportunity. It's very, very special.
Well, thank you both, Crystal and Rosalie, for your further remarks and contextualizing the prior panelists' presentations. So before turning it over to Michael, I'd like to express my personal thank you to all 5 of the panelists today. It's been one of the most informative and complementary set of presentations on a particular subject of great interest and importance to those of us in tribal communities and those of us seeking to assist us in this journey to financial and asset health. So thank you again, and I'll turn it over to Michael, if you will.
Great. Thank you so much, Sparrow. And thank you so much to our speakers today. You know, the information that was shared was so rich and so valuable. And, you know, as I was sitting here taking a lot of notes on different pieces that were shared, and looking at the comments in the box, I think I'm extremely excited because, as Crystal had mentioned, about making sure people are aware of the resources and, you know, making some of these connections that were coming about in the box, in the chat box, I think is really, really exciting. And so speaking of resources, thanks to our various speakers, we compiled a variety of resources. So through the next couple slides, you're going to see some resources. I know you're not going to be able to write them all down right at this moment, but you are going to have access to this PowerPoint and this plethora of resources that are available. So you will have access, and make sure that when you do receive the presentation or you access on the Lead Center website, that you take a moment to really look at them. So I want to say also thank you to Dr. Jason Cummings, Nupa Givarsky, Rosalie Perry, Crystal Hernandez, Crystal Fensel, Special Coach Cote, Lee Gassimo, and of course Sparrow for your leadership in all of this. I want to make sure that you check out the Lead Center's website, where you can find this event's recording and transcript within 5 business days, plus a robust library of resources. We also encourage you to sign up for the Lead Center newsletter, as it gives you information about future and past events and promising practices to the field. Please connect with us, connect with the Lead Center on social media, and there are here's where you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Again, I want to say thank you to the entire team that helped put this conversation together today, and for the leadership of each of them for helping to put this together. We want to thank each of you for spending this hour and a half with us today, and we're excited about future conversations. So again, thank you so much for being with us today.